Today we have two incredibly controversial, interesting topics to talk about. One, what watch brand do we think is going to die in the near future? And two, every time we talk about investing in watches, someone says watches are not an investment. We can argue against that.
Yep. What is up, Watch Fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Vintage Watch Shop.
My name is Michael, and this video is sponsored by Novium.
More on our friends over at Novium later.
Yes,
Today's episode is Q&A format. We're going to handle or tackle like 5 or 6 different questions, and they're all really interesting, and they're all about watches. And if you watch them, you will leave knowing a lot more about our views on the market currently than when you started. But the real two punchy topics towards the end of the video.
What brand do we think is going to suffer, but really could also die? What brand is just not keeping up? They don't have the hit. Every time they make a big investment, it doesn't pay off.
Yep.
And then finally, kind of in that same vein, can you actually invest in watches? Obviously, in COVID, yeah, you could, but were you also just playing the lottery and getting lucky? So what do we think about that now? And this is a Q&A series we want to start up. I guess we'll both start up, but you're kind of running and curating the questions.
Yeah. Cool. So the first one I wanted to touch on was, what are your favorite Omegas in the current catalog? I'm happy to go first if you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mine so it's too typical.
So I love Omega watches. Obviously, Omega's done an amazing thing in the last decade, particularly in improving their catalog and design and function and everything. If you go back 10, 15 years ago, Omega was a shell of what they are now. Right? They were producing good watches, sure, and they had their moon watch, but they were not as refined. They were not as expensive, right? I mean, Omega has moved up market so much in the last 10 years. It's actually unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that being said, how do you pick out your favorite watches? And the watches that I chose are they're great watches, and I'll tell you about them in a second. But the point of my watches is basically to expand a little bit outside on the outer skirts of the Omega catalog a little bit, right? The things that I'm not really seeing people give due credit to. Okay, and the first watch is the Globemaster, particularly in stainless steel with this silvery white dial with the fluted bezel, which I believe is made of tungsten. These watches are phenomenal watches. The Globemaster is basically the collection that is carrying the torch forward for the Constellation. These are about as classic Omega as you could possibly get, right? This is a modern interpretation of a 1950s Omega. This watch is more connected to its lineage than most other watches, period. And Omega's done an amazing job with them. The quality on these watches is incredible. The movements are Meta certified. There's just nothing about this watch that anyone can really kind of bat an eye at. That being said, I think because I like it on a strap and because of I think it rides the line of formality very well. Sure. I think that because it is a little bit formal, people shy away. People go Seamaster. And the Seamaster is great. I'll get to one in a second. But I still think that watch deserves more credit. Right. It is still one of my favorite watches in the Omega collection.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to touch on the Seamaster. So if you want to go first, I can swing it back after.
Yeah, I mean, another one that I wanted to do was the Ploprof. I always have a hard time pronouncing it.
Ploprof.
The Ploprof. This is a watch that is kind of like unwavering in its vision to be specifically for professional divers.
Yes.
This is not a toy. This is not, we have a little bit of diving history, and we want to tap into it. No, they are absolutely dive watches in every single way. These watches make no sense, right? They make no sense on the street. It's like you look at it and you're like,
you should be underwater.
That guy just loves watches.
Yeah.
I love that Omega refuses to compromise on that watch. I just think that's an amazing thing.
Yep.
Stylistically, it's so specific and it's beautiful in an ugly way, and I just think that it's just a really good representation of who Omega is and who they have been from their inception. The original model came out in the 1960s and became really popular in the 1970s. Again, only among professional divers. The idea of wearing this watch as a citizen made no sense.
Exactly.
Whereas other models like the Submariner, even though it's a dive watch, had civilian application immediately because it was just so.
And so it could go over anything.
It's a regular
go under
watch.
Anything. Right.
But this watch was a real tool, and I just think it's really special that Omega still makes it.
I would fully agree. The two watches I'm touching on, are you going to touch on a Seamaster too?
Well, you go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
The two watches that I would pull out of this lineup? I have things that I would love to change, but the World Timer, because that dial is insane. That laser edge dial is absolutely beautiful. And then the Seamaster 300M, the classic, what you think of.
But in this blue particularly?
Oh, yeah. Specifically the commemorative Seamaster anniversary.
Right.
I think, well, we talked about it in a different video, but them releasing an entire new line, new color, that all corresponds to how deep the watch goes in the water, is brilliant. And the 300M is just an iconic case shape in general that I really like. For me, again, I always wish it was smaller, but it's just beautiful. I always, obviously, the Speedmaster is what takes the cake for me always, but the 300M is incredible.
It's a great watch, and I think that obviously when you're talking about your favorite Omega, and I'm saying push the boundaries and don't just go down the middle, but the Seamaster is down the middle, but it's perfect, and it's kind of like that for a reason. It's so famous, like the Datejust, right? It's so famous for a reason, right? Everyone just thinks it's a great watch because it is. And I think that these dial combinations, these colors, really made it all the more special.
I would really say if Omega updated these designs a tiny bit, with certain things, maybe a bracelet or something.
I agree.
Like that, they would just re-explode onto the popular conversation.
And I wonder why they haven't. I wonder why Omega hasn't invested more into the just small tweaks, small modernizations, right? I think they ought to.
Yeah, I agree. I saw a really interesting video that was saying Swatch Group says Omega is, they pitch Omega as the pioneer brand. And the guy was basically saying, it's interesting they pioneer on everything except bracelet design or case shape or size or something like that.
Well, I do quite like the bracelets on those World Timers, on those Aquaterra World Timers.
Oh, yeah. Those are great, yeah.
Next question is, what's the next big watch trend?
Oh, yes. This one I think is interesting because I'll touch on Piaget briefly, but I also want to start talking about color. But Piaget is really what you see with trends where everybody's wearing skinny jeans and then we went to wide. It wasn't like pants slowly went like this. I think everybody now in the watch world, for the most part, was big sports watches, heavy sports watches, and then it became, well, not big, smaller K-shape, but still sports watch, nothing else. And now people that are in the world and are competing with each other and on Instagram and everything are well, what's the most different watch I can get? Because I'm so sick of seeing sports watches. And the answer to that is that. What's on your wrist right now? Right,
yeah, things like this, these Piagets, and I think that, and it's not just Piaget, right? I'll actually even go out a little bit further.
Sure.
One of the big surprises of the last couple of years, I think, has been the success of Vacheron's 222 in yellow gold.
Yeah,
a very 70s design, almost cuff-like, and it became a watch that nobody could get and everyone wanted, and very, very much.
Oh, Brad Pitt could get them.
What was that?
Brad Pitt can get them.
Brad Pitt could get one, exactly.
Business.
Yeah, and it was just really interesting to watch Vacheron's distribution strategy. They gave them to a couple of comedians and a couple of celebrities, and everyone really became one of the hottest watches out there, period. Yeah. And that hasn't happened in a long time in yellow gold, right? The last time you had that was the Nautilus, okay, fine,
sure.
But it's a steel watch. Gold is generally not what people gravitate toward,
right.
I love gold, but it's generally not the move unless it's a day date, in which case, okay, fine, that's an icon.
Sure.
If the day date was available in steel, you know what I mean? Everyone prefers steel so often, right? So I think that the future or the next trend in design is going to be other brands taking a cue from Vacheron and their 222 and saying, I think we need to have our own version. Be it, I don't know if Rolex will do it, but if Rolex introduces their Cellini, but that Midas kind of Cellini, that could work.
Yeah, that'd be nuts.
I think we are going to see a Nautilus in yellow gold, which hasn't happened in a long time. I think you're going to see more of that. And I think that the shame is no one deserves that profit more than Piaget.
Well,
Piaget,
we'll say that until we get into the death.
That'll get into the conversation a little bit, but no one deserves to be the benefactor of that trend more than Piaget. So we'll get into that later.
The one thing I'll add to that question also is, we talked about this briefly at times, but cinema follows the trend of plot gets really popular, then plot goes down as technology increases and we see spectacle.
Right.
Avatar was a spectacle film, and then plot comes back when we're kind of used to spectacle.
Right.
I feel like the beginning collection, we always say the watch roll is 3 years old. The start of that was plot, which was okay, well, I have to read the story of the landscape right now. We have Rolex, we have sports watches, we have this and we have that. Now, I think we're leaning back into spectacle.
Yep.
Rolex with their celebration dial and the puzzle dial and everything like that, where it's I want to see thin gold. What can you guys do? Show me something.
Yep.
And then we'll kind of burrow down and go back to plot. But I think no one shows that better than Tag when they recently brought the Skipper back out, not limited special edition, of being like, people want color and loud now. How can we make this a spectacle again?
Yes, I agree. I think that, when you've got everything, that's when you start to buy spectacle, right? It's like, well, I already have all the basic things.
Yeah.
So now give me a peacock dial.
Exactly.
Give me something just ridiculous. And we'll see what brands are able to deliver on that. I think it's just going to be the brands that, understand that while this is a big departure from what they're used to, it's the future, or at least it's the next stage.
All the brands that said we have to slim everything down and get a integrated sports watch out the door like quickly are going to be like, if they had that attitude, you also have to do that now with colors and varying case shapes and sizes and stuff like that.
Right. What is your favorite Talking Watches episode?
I can't remember the actual episode who was on it, but it was a guy that only had oddly shaped Patek's and Vacheron. Was it Roni?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Roni.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
Good guy, huh?
Yeah. It's good collection. Really good collection.
Unbelievable collection.
Yeah. Okay. My favorite Talking Watches episode is Jean-Claude Biver, whatever. Jean-Claude Biver. JCB.
Yep.
I think his collection is just incredible. He's such a great storyteller. He's clearly incredibly rich, but he is non-pretentious. If that's possible, it is.
He has the fire inside of him about things that you look past that.
Yes. He has such excitement in him that it's unbelievable. It reminds you of it's the kind of guy you want to give money to. He's just so excited. He's so excited and happy to be there. And it's unbelievable. Not to mention just an industry titan, right? The man has formed so much of what we know about what we see in the watch industry.
Why we buy.
Yeah. So I thought it was great. It's one of the greatest collections of Patek Philippe you're just going to see.
I will also say I watched Talking Watches when they came out, or I found them on YouTube in college. I have not rewatched any of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to go back.
What are your thoughts? There's apparently one that's coming up that's so special that they're doing a lot.
I don't have thoughts. I don't know. I don't like guessing. Unless it comes to me, unless there's a signal and it comes to me, I'm like, okay. But otherwise, I don't have a guess.
I was just like, did you change the way you film them or something?
It's probably multiple people all sitting down to talk watches. They probably got like John Mayer, Ed Sheeran.
Expo.
I mean? Yeah, exactly.
It's rounding up the Houdini celebrity bros.
Yes, that's probably what it is, which is great. It's super cool.
It is cool. This video is sponsored by Novium and their HoverPen Interstellar Edition and the HoverPen Future Edition. The Interstellar Edition of the HoverPen leans at a 23.5 degree angle that reminds us of Earth's axis. Now it's tilted on its side.
It's kind of wild.
That's kind of sweet. And obviously you can see it spins very fast, so it got awarded one of the best inventions of 2022 by Time.
It's available in a whole wide array of colors. You got Space Black, Starlight Silver, Mars Magma, and Neptune Blue.
And then, of course, if you want to go the premium level, where we introduce gold that you very much like, you can get an 18-karat gold plated as well as with a real meteorite shard embedded pen.
Go figure, huh?
That's incredible. And then, of course, there's also the Future Edition, which is probably the one I like because it's at more of an angle.
I think this one's even wilder.
This is their latest release. It's available as a 2-in-1 fountain and rollerball pen with interchangeable tip.
Yeah.
So you can mess around with a fountain pen or just go straight to a rollerball.
I think that just looks insane on a desk. I think that's very, very cool.
That is like an atomic design that you have in the 60s.
Totally agree. I love it.
And of course, there is a premium edition with an 18-karat solid gold nib.
Not so bad.
Yes.
Very cool.
So thank you so much to Novium for sponsoring this video. You can check out the link in our description and use the code we have there as well to save 10% off your order.
Go make your desk that much cooler.
Agreed.
Next question, and this is before the last two, right? It's do you believe in prototype dials, blueberry bezels, etc.?
Sure.
So just to lay a little bit of foundation, there's a lot that we don't know about the world of Rolex, the history of Rolex,
of course.
right?
Yep.
There's so many different dial variations that are really like, there's not a lot of information. They were made in such small quantities and they weren't very well documented. The same thing with bezels, same thing with some hands. It's crazy, actually, how many little nuances there are in the world of vintage Rolex.
Sure.
We actually dove into this on an episode of The Zero a month ago or so with John Buckley. If you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to it already. If you're not a member of The Zero, go down to the link in the description and join. We release a podcast every week with a different industry figure. Michael comes on once a month. We do live chats. It's amazing. It's an amazing place to be. I'd love to see you on over there. If you do join, shoot me a DM so we can talk watches. But the point is, the question, do I believe in prototypes? Do I believe in all this stuff? And the obvious answer, and we do go into a lot more detail on the podcast,
of course,
but the obvious answer is, of course I believe that these things exist. I believe that prototypes exist. Of course prototypes exist. It's just logical.
Sure.
But there are a lot of prototypes that I see on the market that I don't believe are real. I think they are fake. They are manufactured, not by Rolex. They're being sold as prototypes.
Yes.
That's what I think.
I would fully agree.
The long and the short of it. There's just so much money at stake. Like, there's so much money in theft that people can't even help themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what I think.
I think, especially when you go to, well, we saw it with Adam Levine's collection, where you're like, that's clearly not real.
Yeah.
When you get to that level, like, a Submariner's not going to be sold to Adam Levine. But something with a purple dial that was not supposed to leave Rolex's HQ will sell to Adam Levine.
Exactly.
So I have my guy make a purple dial, boom.
And they're not that hard to make, right? If you have the right machines, they're not that hard to make, which is crazy, which is why I never really got into like the super, super collectible world of vintage Rolex, like the crazy stuff, the hundreds of thousands and the millions of dollars stuff. This stuff scared the shit out of me. I was like, God, people are selling fake stuff all the time. I just can't be around this. I'm gonna get burnt, and then I'm screwed.
Well, we talked about the fact that if you sell two, say $150,000 each, you are then randomly one Tuesday on the hook for $300,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then what?
This is fake.
That's crazy.
Whoa.
Okay, next question.
Yes.
What brand do you think is likely to suffer / die off in the near future?
What brand is likely to suffer or die? I think it's an interesting question because there's a lot of brands right now where I feel like they're doing phenomenal. There are some brands where I'm like, you're clearly lagging behind, but watches in your catalog are never going to let you go down.
Right.
And then there are some brands that just don't seem like they take a ton of swings and they can't hit out of the park.
Right.
Do you want to go first or want me to go first?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the conversation we had before about Piaget. Piaget stands to gain so much from this renaissance, right? It's basically like waiting for your moment where your one skill is appreciated and then forgetting to show up at school that day. You know what I mean? It's like that's what's happening with Piaget. Like
you said, they didn't time the polo correctly if they were going to recreate it.
Right. Like there's going to be a renaissance of like gold, kind of gaudy, watchmaking, really stylistic 70s watchmaking.
Yeah.
I think that all the brands are going to get on it. I really do.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be huge. But I think that Piaget will miss the boat. 100%.
That's terrible.
Piaget should be releasing 2 or 3 models that all fit into this category. Gold, white gold, platinum, rose, different shapes.
They're like, we're back. Look what we're doing.
Same movement. They could pioneer the renaissance of this sort of watchmaking. And the truth is, it's happening either way. So they can get credit for pioneering it. Meanwhile, the tides are already shifting in that direction, right? They're in the perfect scenario, and I think that they're going to miss it. And I don't think that they can even afford to miss it because Piagets are not selling at great numbers. The brand is struggling, and I don't know what the future is there.
That would be the saddest outcome ever.
It will happen.
Piaget goes down. This one, it is not in that position. I think these watches are always going to sell. I think the brand was recently valued at like $110 million or something.
I think it was even more.
Yeah, an obscene amount of money. It has to be foot traffic sales. I see Bremont, they have watches that I like, that I think are cool, but I see them as the epitome of, is that Longines?
What is that?
Yeah, exactly.
What is that watch?
What is that brand? Because they don't have I don't think they have a signature watch. I would argue that they don't really have a signature style.
No.
They make cool watches.
It's mealy mouthed. And they're cool. And listen, I'm sure some of you guys are wearing some Bremonts, and some of them are cool. Like, we're scrolling through, and there's nothing wrong with the watches. They're good. And some of them are actually even really, really cool. And they started off with some marketing about special forces, but, really, they're not. I mean, some of these watches are $6,000 or $7,000.
Yes.
Those watches should be 3 to 4.
These watches, this should be Longines' greatest fear. But what happens is I see, like I'm looking at the MB2, for example. I see that and I'm like, well, I can get the Heritage Diver, I think, for $3,000.
Yeah.
In 4 different sizes.
Right.
And they're the original makers of that.
I agree.
So I see this brand as something that could be cool. It's on the precipice of being cool. They have this back, like safety orange case back.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's cool.
It's kind of cool.
But at the same time, I'm like, I don't see you do look like you looked at a bunch of watch advertisements and were like, okay, aviation's cool. People like 2 crowns and play. Okay, aviation, yeah, we'll do that. We'll sell that.
Yeah.
And it works when people come in the door. But when I think about the brand as a future, I'm like, you have to build up something else that's going to take you to be a long-lasting brand.
Agreed. I don't get the brand.
And I'm totally wrong because people walk into the shop and say,
yeah, apparently the brand's worth a couple $100 million.
Yeah. So don't hire me, Vermont.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yep, I fully agree.
And frankly, forget about my opinion. Again, that's a cool watch.
Yeah.
Click on that one.
Supermarine.
Yeah, that's a cool watch.
I think this would be this is probably the.
It's got to be expensive. 6,500. Okay, I get that watch.
Sure.
I get that watch more than the other stuff that we just saw.
But here's
this is nice on the rubber strap.
It's Supermarine Chrono.
Yeah, and that's a cool watch.
Here's the question that I then ask.
6,500 is still a lot of money.
You're in the store. You don't know much about watches. Here is this brand, the Supermarine. It's their best-selling model. Here is Breitling. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, you walk into Breitling to see what they've got.
Yeah, I got to check out Breitling. I know that brand.
You probably leave with the Breitling.
Yeah. The person next to you is like, well, that's Breitling, dude.
Yeah, it's Breitling. You're going to get a Brahma?
Yeah, it sounds close enough to
right.
It could be that.
Yeah, Breitling.
Either way, cool brand, but I do struggle to see the total originality, which I think could hurt the brand.
Yes, I agree. Whether you're a Submariner guy or a 50 Fathoms guy or a Day-Date guy or an FP Journe guy, you've got to just take a step back and appreciate this history here. This isn't stuff you're going to find in a showcase. This is not mass-produced stuff, which is beautiful in its own right. I mean, this is treasure hunting. And the last question, and it's a big one. We're going to make a whole video dedicated to this topic.
We really want to. This is the purpose of this is to get you talking about it, so we can bring this up in the next Q&A to see what people are saying in the comments.
Can watches be an investment? And that's a very, very large question that has to be segmented out. Watches, vintage watches, modern watches, independent watches. There's so many different facets.
How long has the market existed?
Right.
Like that.
So where would you like to start? How would you like to start?
I would like to start, well, two things. One, I think we have two markets. We have the very incredibly wealthy market where we're talking about Patek. Mm-hmm. And then we have the new-ish market where we're talking about Rolex, where right now we're in the era of seeing old guys that came back from war being like, my GMT is worth how much?
Right.
Like, I bought this on deployment and came back and it's worth what? Which I think kicked off the beginning of people being like, oh, if I buy a Rolex, it doesn't hold its value, it's worth more.
Right.
But COVID then pushed everything into overdrive. Like I say, during COVID, also Bitcoin had that same effect where people were like, oh, that, I need to put my money in. I need to get that. So whenever we say that, people are like, that's not true. Watches are not an investment. They're a terrible investment. So I'd like to start at the question of, one, do you think those two catalyst events made it an investing market? Or no, are we flash in the pan and they will slowly move up?
No, I think there's a lot of things going on, and those are contributing factors to like some of the explosion.
Yeah.
But again, I'm coming from the world of vintage watches. That's where I've always worked in, and it just makes perfect sense, right? Like there's a limited quantity of rare, desirable things in good condition. Mm-hmm. In time, assuming the industry gets larger,
sure,
which is a bet you're making, I think it's a safe bet, the value of those limited items increases.
Yeah.
That's not controversial, right? Like, tanks and trays were a good buy under 20 grand, and they were under 20 grand, right? There were so few of them.
Basculants I was buying for $2,000. Now they're worth $10 minimum.
Right. And Basculants were actually, mass manufactured.
Yeah.
They were even in mechanical versions. There are a lot of them, right?
You get them for nothing.
Not compared to a Rolex, but there are a lot of them compared to just other watches, right? It was kind of a no-brainer that there's a whole world of watches that should have been worth more money.
Yeah.
Now we look at it, we say, okay, well, people have woken up. Mm-hmm. Prices have skyrocketed. Are there any investments left in watches?
Oh,
that's a good question, right?
Sure.
Because the prices have gone up so high, right? Like the Basculant that was 2,000 is now 10. Does it have any chance of getting to 15 or 20?
Right.
And it's not just about making money too. It's kind of about, well, if I want this watch, should I buy it now because it's probably going to be 15 in a couple of years.
Because
it's not even looking to cash out. That's just looking to kind of hedge against inflation.
I wasn't even thinking about that with the Basculin in college. I was hoping I could make like a little bit of money off it when I was flipping it. And now I'm like, I would have just kept it.
Should have kept it if you knew.
Amazing watch to have.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. Now on the modern watch front, I don't think that watches are an investment. I don't think they're a good investment. I don't think that investment should even really come into it. Right?
They're a flip.
You're right. They're a flip. Sure. If you get allocated a modern Rolex or modern Patek, sure. I don't think that's going to be going away anytime soon.
True.
I don't.
Maybe the vast difference in how much you'll make with the flip could shrink, but I don't think that will ever change.
But on modern watches, you're supposed to lose a little bit of money, right? You're supposed to. Just like cars, even if it's a good one, you're supposed to lose a little bit of money. Now, Ben Clymer used to have it all the time from Hodinkee. When I think the day in which negotiation is no longer going to be there. Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I had no problem with that. I don't really like to negotiate on expensive things either. I want to walk into a watch boutique, say, that's good, I like that. And they give it to you. They sell it to you.
Yeah.
No matter, can I get 15% off? I don't want 15% off. Sell it to me for the full price.
Exactly.
I want the full price because it makes me feel like it's a luxury experience. Yeah. Right? And if you could sell it to me the full price, and that also means that when I walk out, it's not worth half. Because that's what was happening, right? You go into Omega, the Omega Seamaster was $6,000, they would be 15% off, but you go outside and it's really worth half, right? So the 15% did nothing. Now, the watch is worth a hell of a lot more, like the residual value is there, but now you're paying 15%, you're paying the retail price, right? I don't have a problem with it. I really don't have a problem with that. But I don't think that modern watches really should ever be an investment. I think it's a stupid investment class. I think that vintage, yes. I think that hyper limited, sure, that makes sense. I think that independence can be a good investment, but independent watches are very much like vintage watches. They're hyper limited.
They made one.
Right. Scope. I mean, there are 3 in the world, 5 in the world, 11. That's nothing.
Right.
That's nothing.
And most guys aren't selling them even. So it's
and you can't even go get one really. Like you want to buy a vintage Cartier, it's actually quite difficult. You need to work to buy it.
Sure.
Same thing with independent. You need to work to buy it. Now, obviously, when you flip it independent, it's a different thing. Hopefully, you don't flip it independent. Hopefully, you buy it and you love it. It's yours and it's yours forever and all that's all well and good. But to say that watches are a great investment, hoorah, rah-rah, not really there either. But we cannot ignore the reality that there are undervalued watches in the market.
Right. I think the big thing we'll talk about on the full video is what you're talking about. Can we hit an upper limit? Are we going to be making a video in 30 years where we're like, I can't be like the Basquiat, I thought it was crazy at 10. Now it's 150.
Yeah, right. I don't see that happening.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't mean 150, but I just mean it doubled, it tripled, whatever it may be. Yeah. It's like, wow, that really, no, there is not a limit because they never brought it back.
Right.
It didn't really move at all.
Right.
That's just something that could happen. Could watches move like that?
Look at the Santos Carré, right? My yellow gold Santos. That watch, I think I paid $13,000 for that watch, somewhere around there. It's probably worth about $30,000 right now. Is there a downside to it? No, I don't think so. I mean, with a fire sale, there is. People can give you $20,000 for something on a fire sale and take it because you need the money.
Sure.
But no, I don't think there's a downside. Is it going to double? Is it a $60,000 watch? No.
Well, not right now.
I could see in the 40s. I could see that, right? The collectible market. But you need to keep it somewhat related to its comps.
Yeah.
I don't think it's comparable to $45,000 watches.
Yeah, because I'm also saying, I think we're also talking about you saying, will it get to this value and hold? When I'm like, it could go like this and then come right back up.
Well, listen, when there are limited numbers, attention just goes on something, it skyrockets, and then it plummets again, right? Like, that's what happens when there are limited numbers of things, right? Because it takes so few people to actually move a market.
Of course.
But I don't see like a sustainable 20% jump or 30% jump in that watch. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I see other watches like a good example is, let's say, a Tudor Jumbo Date Day. Sure. Those watches are like $4,000 to $5,000. I think they could be worth $6,000 and $7,000.
Yeah.
They're great watches. I could see that. They're really, really good. They're actually perfect Tudors. And Tudor actually doesn't even make a comp as good as that now.
Right.
It's actually the best.
Exactly.
So I can see that being worth $6,000 and $7,000. Now, are you going to buy a watch to make $2,000 over 3 years? I don't know. It depends on your interest in making $2,000 over 3 years.
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, but so far as hedging against the inflation, because you want the watch anyway down the road, yeah, I do that. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
There are certainly things that I'm like there are some brigades that I look at and I'm like, I don't really need that watch. I don't really want that watch per se. It's $11,000, but I could definitely envision a world in which that watch is $20,000.
But it's crazy that no one's touching it, right?
Right. So then I'll buy it. You know what I mean? I'll hold on to it. I'm hedging against kind of the inflation. I'm also kind of like betting that I may actually want this a year from now.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at 11 it makes sense. At 20, I'm no longer interested. But I could lock myself in, We could lock you in right now to a blue chip stock.
That's
right?
you doing.
That's the truth.
Right.
If there's one thing in the world I know, it's airlines, and Kushan Airlines are the future of airlines.
Cut to Vermont Studio.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think about watches and investments. But we'll make a much larger video about this soon.
Definitely.
But that's it.
Cool.
Hope you guys like this episode. Like it. And if you want more content from Theo and Harris, subscribe to our Patreon down below. It's weekly conversations. It's an amazing place. If you do join, shoot me a DM and we'll chat about watches. And we do meetups in the city. We're going to be announcing one soon. And that's it. Oh, and friend me over on LinkedIn as well. Friend me over on LinkedIn. Link down below.
Friend the man.
Friend the man. Join my network.
Yes. Again, thank you so much to Novium for sponsoring this video.
Straps, as many of you should know, bring a whole world of potential to mix up your watch collection. They breathe new life into watches. They help you pull out different colors. They give them new personality. Straps can be very addictive. I know people with 2 watches and 10 straps because it adds so many facets to a collection in a fairly easy and fun way. So that's why they become such a part of the Theo and Harris culture and identity. I think we sell more exotic straps than almost anybody because I just love them so much and I love sharing them with you.